June 25th, 1967, the musical group The Beatles made world history in that they revealed a brand new single entitled All You Need Is Love. It was written by John Lennon, but later on it was attributed to John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Well, they made history in that they became, through the issuing of this song, the very first ones to link up the world through satellite. Matter of fact, it was under the heading of Our World is what it was. And it was the first satellite link up in the world. It's estimated that over 350 million people viewed the singing of that song, All You Need Is Love. Later on, over the next few weeks and months, that song, some of you aren't going to understand what I'm about to say, but over the next few weeks, that song became the Flower Power Anthem. Some of you don't even know what that is. The Flower Power Anthem for the Summer of Love. Well, the singing of those words, all you need to love, is extremely important. And Jesus himself says to his disciples, this is what they need. If there is a secret weapon at the disposal of the disciple of Jesus Christ, it is God's love. It is a supernatural love that God wants to unleash through his followers. Every one of us in this room are going to have a time and period in our life in which we're going to have haters. It's kind of the term they use, haters. And some of us are going to have haters that are going to mix no words about it. They're actually going to come to us and tell us they hate us. They're actually going to take the words that we have spoken and they're going to distort those words. Now, some of our haters are going to tell us they hate us because of our relationship to Jesus. Some of us will just simply be hated because of our personalities, but Jesus here is referring to those that would hate his followers. Now, what is a follower of Jesus to do when he encounters a hater? Well, look at verse 27. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Now, the seeds of what Jesus said can be found back in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 17 and 18. Now, listen to these words given in the law. You shall not hate your fellow countrymen in your heart. You may surely reprove your neighbor, but you shall not incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Now, let me make a couple observations regarding these words of Jesus before us this morning. Now, in some ways, they're rather discouraging words. And let me tell you why. Because we read these words, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you, and the initial thought is, how in the world can I get this to happen? I mean, I just can't see myself mustering up a love for someone that hates me, that is distorting my words, that's in the process of character assassination. I just don't see myself being able to kind of develop that type of love towards a person that is doing such things to myself. So in some sense, that's rather discouraging. But another side of this is, this passage is also extremely encouraging. Now, let me tell you why. God never asks us to do something that he himself does not plan to do through us. Yes, it is absolutely impossible to muster up a love for our enemies in our own selves. But if we are disciples of Jesus Christ, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But through Jesus Christ, it is possible, it's actually demanded of Jesus that we would do so. Now, these words that Jesus speaks comes from a sermon that we commonly call the Sermon on the Mount. If you're taking notes, that's Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. Matthew actually dedicates 3 whole chapters to the Sermon on the Mount. But Luke himself just spends about 30 verses on this Sermon on the Mount. Now, Luke has a purpose, and Luke hits 4 major areas when he gives this sermon. And let me just mention them to you. Last week, we looked at verses 20 through 26, and we talked about circumstances, and we looked at what are called the Beatitudes, or have these attitudes. This morning, we're looking at verses 27 through 38, and we're talking about people, and we're talking about God's love. Next week, we'll look at verses 39 through 45, and we'll talk about self, and we'll talk about evaluation of self. And then next time, we'll look at verses 46 through 49, and we'll talk about God, and we'll talk about doing His will. So here's the thought of our passage this morning. Jesus demands us as disciples to love the unlovable because Jesus intends to love through us. That's why Jesus can demand that we love the unlovable, because He plans to do it through us. Now, that's impossible apart from the new birth. It's impossible by not being right with God. But knowing God, being right with God, we have the Spirit of God that has gushed His love into us. Romans 5:5 tells us. So it is what the believer is to emulate and to follow. So here's how I want to break this morning. In verses 27 through 31 is love demanded. God demands this love. And then in verses 32 through 38 is love explained. And Jesus is going to make it clear that it's an unconditional love. It's not conditional from like the world. If you love me, I love you. If you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. That's not the love of the Christian. So we'll find out. He says, what reward is to love someone that loves you? There's no reward in it. So let's pick it up here in verse 27, and let's talk about love demanded. And he says, but I say to you who hear. Now, this statement is an introductory statement to get the audience to listen. Jesus could have also said, to those that are listening, or another way of saying that is to those that can hear me, is what Jesus is saying. So Jesus is going to start what He's about to say by getting His listeners' attention. Now, it's really important that we understand who Jesus is speaking to here. It's extremely important. And we note that in verse 47, it says, everyone who comes to me and hears my words and acts on them. The context of this is it goes back to the day before Jesus said these words. It actually began where Jesus spends an entire night in prayer. And the reason being is that the next morning, Jesus is going to choose 12 apostles out of a multitude of disciples. We see this in Luke chapter 6, verses 12 through 13. So Jesus does so, and He chooses 12 apostles after a whole night of prayer. And then it tells us in verse 17, Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place. Some have called this the Sermon on the Level, which is a good term for it because it was a plateau. It was a level area. It's kind of a play with words. But there on this level place, it says there was a large crowd of disciples and a great throng of people. So the ones that He is primarily speaking to are the disciples. A disciple is a follower of the teacher and his teaching. But Jesus says here, I say to you who hear. So though it is addressed to those that already have a relationship with God, they're already born again, they're followers of the teacher and his teaching, anyone that would have an ear to hear, Jesus says, I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to say. Now, I realize this morning it's the same thing. I mean, I have prepared this message to speak to Christians this morning because I'm going to be asking a Christian to love his enemies, and I realize this morning that's impossible if you're a non-Christian. There's just no way you can do it. But at the same time, I'm hoping that you'll listen to me and you'll realize I need to be born again so that I can receive that power of Jesus so that I then have the ability to love my enemies. So that's what Jesus is doing. He's reaching his disciples, but there's a large multitude, and he just kind of throws it out there that if you can hear me, if you're listening to me, you need to pay attention to what I am saying. Now, there's another thing that I want to bring up. If you look at verse 22, notice what Jesus just said. Blessed are you when men hate you, ostracize you, insult you, scorn your name as evil for the sake of the Son of Man. Be glad in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way their fathers used to treat the prophets. And then in verse 26, woe to you when all men speak well of you, for their fathers used to treat the false prophets in the same way. So the immediate context is he's not only speaking to disciples, but he's warning them about persecution. He's warning them that they're going to suffer for their relationship in Jesus. With that in mind, he now says that we need to love our enemies. Now, no doubt these will be persecutors. No doubt people will hate us because we love the Lord. You know, Christians are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Jesus said this in Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. And all of us know this, that salt stings and light exposes. If you've ever had a cut and then you've gotten into the ocean, you'll find out where your cut is. When we went to the Dead Sea is notorious for this. It's the saltiest, most mineral body of water on the planet. I mean, it's impossible to sink in the Dead Sea. I mean, you get a cut and you go into the Dead Sea, you're going to know you got a cut. There's no doubt about it. That little cut is going to be screaming, I'm in pain, because it just burns so bad. But that's what the salt does. At the same time, the light exposes. And in our passage, he speaks about this, that sinners show their hatred and they avoid us and reject us in verse 22. They insult us in verse 28. They physically abuse us in verse 29. And they'll sue us in verse 30. So we are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. So how should a disciple respond to their enemies? So here in verses 27 and 28, Jesus gives 4 commands. And I hope you'll jot these down. You know why? Because every one of us are going to have our haters. And Jesus is going to tell us what to do. There's no question what to do. Sometimes people go, I got this neighbor that hates me. What should I do? Well, if you're paying attention right now, you can jot these 4 things down. Jesus commands us to do these 4 things. And I hope that we'll jot them down. The first thing he says, number 1, is love your enemies. Love your enemies. Hatred only breeds more hatred. In the NIV, James 1:20, listen to what James says. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. If someone hates you and you hate them back, all it's going to produce is deeper, more profound hatred and ugliness is what it's going to produce. Now, when Jesus said to love, there were 4 Greek words for love. We only have 1 word for love. You know, I love Mikosinas, and I do. But I hope I love the church better, you know. So we just only have 1 word, you know, for love. You know, I love Rosa Maria's, and I kind of do. You know, it's like, but we only have 1 word for love. But in the Greek language, there were 4 different words for love that would really articulate the type of love that the person was writing about or speaking about. The first word is the word phileo. We've heard this word. It means friendship love. We have Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, and it's not. Okay, the next word is eros. Eros. Eros is by which we get our word erotic love. That's what Hollywood knows about eros love. Then we have the third word known as storge, which speaks about a natural affection. Now, Jesus, when he said love your enemies, he wasn't talking about phileo, friendship love, eros, erotic love, or storge, natural affection. He used the Greek word agape. Some referred to it as the love of the gods. And the reason it was called that is because it was a supernatural love that was supposedly experienced by the gods. The Greek gods would have agape. They could do some of the most loving acts to some of the most undeserving of people. That's the word that God uses here. It's the highest love known to man. It is a deliberate love rooted in the will, a love by choice. It is a deep, continuous, growing, and ever-renewing activity of the will, superintended by the Holy Spirit. So this agape love is a supernatural love. One said it this way: I will love this person because by God's grace, I choose to love this person. And that's correct. Romans 5:5 says, and hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Now, when he says love your enemies, let me just be up front, let me be clear, that's impossible. It is absolutely impossible apart from the new birth. So if you're a non-Christian and you think you're going to obey the words of Jesus, I will prove you wrong, and this passage will prove you wrong. You cannot have enough willpower, enough motion, I don't care how much you want to psych yourself out, you cannot muster up enough love to love your enemies, and you can't do it continuously. It's absolutely impossible. It must come through the new birth. Now remember, when God asks us to do the impossible, God is planning to accomplish it through us. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now our enemies can come in different forms. Maybe our enemy, as I speak right now, is your spouse. It could very well be. And being, locked down has created a lot of enemies in the home, that's for sure. And what are you looking at? That whole thing that's been going on. And let me just say something. I'm going to do a quick little info commercial for Enjoying Marriage. One of the things that tonight in the first session of Enjoying Marriage, one of the things that Ron Wiseman is going to bring out is that there are more differences with our spouse than things we have in common. And that's important to learn. That's a very important thing to learn about marriage. Because the purpose of that is God is compensating for the areas that we lack. So God gives us a partner, a mate, that has what we don't. Now, here's the flip side, is the devil loves to use that and to magnify the differences and say, why are we even together? We're so different. So instead of using it as a tool, it becomes a weapon that divides couples up. So one of the things that we're going to be talking tonight about Enjoying Marriage is about that very area. The differences are God-given. God gave us someone that's the absolute opposite of us, and there's literally hundreds and hundreds of opposites. One of the assignments is you have a lifelong assignment of writing down all the opposites that we have with our spouse, and it's just a tremendous thing. So when someone says, well, I just can't love this person. Now, if they're a non-Christian, they're correct. But if they're a Christian, that's incorrect, because you can. Greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So really, what you should be saying and honestly saying is I really don't want to love this person. That's the more accurate phrase to use. And I hear this all the time. People say, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's true, but you're not a dog. Okay, and that's the big difference. That may be true of a dog. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you're not a dog. You're a person. You've been created in the image and the likeness of God, and God can transform you and I from the inside out. Maybe it's a coworker. Last service, an individual was telling me about a situation where he had three coworkers that did everything possible to get their boss fired. But what happened is they left and he stayed. It was awesome to hear the story. How he did. He wasn't upset. He just trusted in the Lord. He just shared what was going on, and what happened, they're gone and he stayed. So that's how that worked out. It could be a coworker. Maybe it's a neighbor. I had a neighbor like this. I swear she rode a broom. I kid you not. She'd get off her broom in her driveway, and I would say hi, and she'd slam the door. I'm going, okay, I had one time a baby Christian, I'm serious when I say this, the baby Christian said to me, he goes, I saw in the bookstore you got Moody Bibles. Are those for Moody people? Yeah. It's Moody Publishers, by the way. I said, yeah, it will help you. You're a Moody person. You should read it. So people are like this. I mean, there's some people that are just, oh my gosh. Sometimes I like to ask them how they're doing just to listen to them whine. It's like you can just hear them whining and complaining and so forth. So what does Jesus mean by loving them? Well, he's talking about real actions. So let's look now at some actions. Number 2, unnatural deeds. Unnatural deeds. Do good. And literally in the Greek, continue doing good to those who hate you. Can you imagine doing good things to someone that hates us? But you know what's so amazing about what Jesus is saying here, and we've found this to be so true? That if you wait for the feelings to do good, they'll never come. But if you will act upon what Jesus said and you'll start doing good things, guess what will happen? The feelings will catch up. Feelings follow actions. So if we'll do what Jesus tells us to do here, guess what's going to catch up? The feelings. But if you wait for the feelings, the actions will never take place. It just will never happen. So this is his prescription for doing that, is to do good things. And you say, well, but you don't understand. You don't understand this husband of mine. He just doesn't appreciate me. And you don't understand this wife of mine. She doesn't respect me. You don't understand these kids of ours. They don't follow the commands and the directions, and you don't know about this boss I have. He's just like so unreasonable. I mean, you don't know what you're asking here. Well, if we'll go that extra mile, we'll do what Jesus says here, guess what's going to catch up? Your feelings. They will catch up. But if you wait for them, you'll never do what Jesus commands us to do. Look at verse 28. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Number 3, unnatural words. Notice the next one now. Bless those. That means continue blessing those who continue cursing you. So those that are cursing you, you're to continue blessing them. What does that mean? It means to speak pleasantly or kindly to them, those who curse you. Proverbs 17:27 says, he who restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool, when he keeps silent, is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he's counted prudent. So even a fool, if he keeps his mouth shut, they think, wow, that guy's got a lot of wisdom. All he's doing is just shutting up is all he's doing. So imagine if you reverse that and you start saying kind things. Imagine what that would produce. That's like over the top. I think of Stephen, one of the deacons of the New Testament church, was dragged out of the city and was being stoned to death in Acts 7:59. Listen to these words. And they went on stoning Stephen as he called on the Lord and said, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And then falling on his knees, he cried out with a loud voice, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And having said this, he fell asleep or he died. Wow. His last breath was a prayer and a blessing. Can you imagine that? One of the things that has helped me over the years, and I can't remember when I finally came to this point, but it's been years. When you got a hater and you got someone that's out for you, one of the things to be reminded is if that person truly knew Jesus, would they be acting the way they're acting? And the answer to that is no. The next question would be is, does that person know the Lord? If we say yes, they do, then the next question could be, if they were walking with the Lord and in true fellowship with the Lord, would they be doing what they're doing? And the answer to that is no. So what that ultimately does is it gives us compassion for them because they're lost. They're absolutely lost. And think about the fact that they're going to suffer great loss unless they repent and come to know God, unless they repent and get right with God. They are going to be judged for their actions. So in a lot of ways, they're so blind to it, they don't even see it. Our heart goes out to them. How lost can you be that you don't even know you're lost? But that's what's at stake, and that helps us. That will help us to be able to bless them because they just don't get it. They just don't understand. And you got to be careful not to take it personal. Because if it is the Lord, it's really against the Lord. It's not you or me. Number 4, unnatural prayers. Unnatural prayers. Pray for those. Continue praying who mistreat you. Of course, we just saw that with Stephen in Acts chapter 7, verse 60. We saw that with him. But Jesus himself in Luke 23:34, and Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they cast lots, dividing up his garments among them. Something about prayer. You know, when we're praying for our enemies, 2 things happen. Not only is God going to change the person we're praying for, but God is changing the petitioner. That's you and me. As we're praying, God is working on us. As we're praying for them, God's working on them. So actually 2 things can be taking place as we're praying. 1 Timothy 2:1. First of all, then I urge that entreaties, prayers, petitions, thanksgivings be made on behalf of all men, for kings and all who are in authority, in order that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. You see, his point is this: it's impossible to gossip and badmouth someone and at the same time pray for them. Try it. When you get out of service, try it. Try to badmouth someone, try to gossip about them, at the same time pray for them. See if that works for you. It won't work. It's either one or the other. And what Paul is telling Timothy, listen, if we'll pray for these folks that are in authority, we'll pray for those, all men, if we'll pray for them, we can lead tranquil lives. We can have peace in our hearts. We can have peace in our lives, regardless of the decisions and the poor things they are doing. We can have peace because we brought it before the throne of grace. Now, in verses 29 through 31 describes this unconventional love. And let me kind of preface these next verses. We must not look at these admonitions as a series of rules to be obeyed. They describe an attitude of the heart that expresses itself positively when others are negative, and generously when others are selfish, all to the glory of God. So we're going to look at some pretty hard statements that Jesus is going to speak. And he's not saying that literally this is what you're to do, but he's talking about the attitude of our heart when these things happen. That's what he's concerned about. So in verse 29, whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. So this first one that he gives, this admonition, is about patience. And this patience is, how much will we put up with? And that's really the question that Jesus is asking his disciples. Whoever hits you, the term hits means to strike or to leave a mark on your cheek or on your jawbone, is what he's saying. So somebody hauls off and they leave a mark on your cheek or on your jawbone. What does Jesus say? You offer him the other also, is what he says. So does that mean you just get a tattoo, I'm a punching bag, and just kind of walk around, you know, and let people take turns smacking you in the face? Can I be first too? But can we be first in slapping someone? You know, I was in India one time. This is a weird thing. We were on this private beach that belonged to the ministry, and as we were there, this drunk guy comes up and tells us to get off the property. And I thought it was very interesting because it belonged to the church. So one of the guys that was with me, he was a bodyguard, and he actually at one time was a professional boxer. He's a good guy to have with you. So this guy kept mouthing off, and he told them, stop, you need to leave, wouldn't leave. So he hauls off and just clocks the guy right in front of me, and the guy hits the ground. And I thought, oh my gosh. So a few minutes later, I come back, and they're hugging and praying. I go, this is a new ministry, Punch and Pray. This is the most unique ministry in India I'd ever seen before. I thought, maybe we should start that here, Punch and Pray. So is that what we do? Do we just become the instant punching bag? Go next door to your neighbor. Hey, if you want to punch me on the right cheek, and then I can turn to the left. Well, I read this story about this Christian that had a neighbor that was just constantly antagonizing him and hassling him and always mocking him for his relationship with Jesus. Well, one day he comes over, the heathen knocks on the Christian's door, and he says, hey, I ran across this verse in your Bible in Luke 6:29, and did Jesus say these words, whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also? And the Christian says, he sure did. So the man rolls up his sleeve and just pops the Christian on the side of the face. And then the guy rolls up his sleeve again. He says, what are you doing? He goes, I'm going to hit the other side. Jesus said, turn to the other one. So he hauls off and hits him on the other side, at which the Christian starts rolling up his sleeve, and the heathen goes, what are you doing that for? He says, well, Jesus said you can hit him on the right and on the left, and after that, Jesus was silent, so I'm going to take it from there. So that's what he did. Is that what Jesus is saying here? Is that, if someone has done you wrong, you know what? You get back 10 times. That's what you do. You give them the first two. The first two are on me, and then after that, you're on your own. You can do whatever you need to do. Well, Matthew 5:38 says, you have heard that it was said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist him who is evil, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. So what Jesus is talking about in this particular passage is he's talking about our need to always even the score. And some of us are like that. If someone does us wrong, they're going to get it back. That's just the way it is. I don't forgive, I get even. That's what I do. And I bury the hatchet and I leave the handle up for easy access. That's what I do. And that's what Jesus is speaking against. There will be times when we'll just have to say, that's on you. I'm going to walk away. You've insulted me. You've hurt. I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to take matters into my own hands. You know what? I'm just going to let this one go. And that's what he's talking about. Maybe some of us right now are in a situation like that where someone has really done us wrong. They've attacked our character. They've committed a character assassination. You say, you don't have to right the wrong. You can just let it go. Let your name, let your character speak for itself. That's it. You're not going to convince them anyway. So maybe it's one of those times where you just turn the other cheek and say, if that's the way it's going to be, then that's just the way it's going to be. This next one is generosity. How much will we give? Whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. So they want to take your cloak, your new Calvary Chapel Rialto hoodie sweatshirt. They want to take this thing. And he says, they want to take your shirt. They give them your hoodie also. That's what you do. Now, again, this is against frivolous lawsuits and frivolous little issues that in the scope of eternity don't mean anything. Jesus says in Matthew 5:40, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. And whoever shall force you to go 1 mile with them, go with them too. We need to see this as an opportunity to be different from the world. Maybe right now you're going through a divorce and you got a spouse that wants everything. Maybe God would tell you, give them the washer and the dryer. Might as well give them the couch. That's what they've been living on for 3 years anyway, so give them the couch too. So I'm going to give you the washer and dryer. What do you mean you're going to get? Yeah, no, you can have them. There was a case here years ago, and I wish I could remember the particulars. It was a divorce, and the spouse got a hold of this whole idea that, you know what? I'm just going to bless them. I am going to walk in love. And they just started allowing the spouse to have all of this stuff. And the former spouse was so taken by it, it did a reversal in their relationship. That's what he's talking about here. I mean, it's not worth the gospel. It's all going to burn and perish anyway. So is it something that we can say, you know what, you can just have it. I'll just give it to you. If that's so important to you, that if that's the deal breaker, then you know what, it's yours. Don't give it a second thought. It's going to be yours. Look at verse 30. Give to everyone who asks of you. Whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. Notice this next one is charity. How far will we go? Give to everyone who asks of you, or literally keep on giving. Now, does that apply to panhandlers? I really believe that that's one of the worst things we can do. We had a captain from the San Bernardino Police Department address us one time, and he was talking about this. In a group I was with, he was talking about this. He goes, if you want to hurt a panhandler, just give them money. He said, because if that panhandler wanted a place to stay, we have it. If they want medical attention, we got it. If they want a job, they have it. If they want food, they can have it. He says, but there's no takers. He says, so by giving them money, you are enabling them to continue this lifestyle. You may feel good about giving them money, but you're not really helping them. And I don't think he's saying that here. What he is referring to is people that have a genuine need. Those that are really hurting. Matthew 5:42 says, give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Leon Morris said it this way: if Christians took this one absolutely literal, there would soon be a class of saintly paupers owning nothing and another prosperous idlers and thieves. It is not this that Jesus is seeking, but a readiness among his followers to give and give and give. So really, this statement that he's giving, he's talking about money. He's talking about how money has a way of exposing where we're at as Christians. Talk about this when we give unto the Lord. It's been said that you can determine where a person's at with their relationship with the Lord looking at their bank statements or looking at their credit card statements. You can look at where God fits into all of that. It's all about themselves. It's all about their entertainment, their enjoyment. There's something seriously wrong. It was Augustine who said, give to everyone that asks, but not everything he asks. You want to hurt people, you can hurt people by giving to them what they ask for. It may not be the best thing at all. You got a person that's a drunk, and you're giving them money for alcohol. You're taking a drug addict, giving them money to buy drugs. How are you helping them? Now, it's one thing if they say, hey, I'm hungry. That's a different thing. I remember one time I was out in front of a Burger King, and I go, hey, the guy asked for money. I said, nope, not going to give you money. Are you hungry? And he goes, yeah. And I go, okay, what do you want for Burger King? He goes, I don't like Burger King. I'm sorry, that's where I'm eating. Have a great day. That was it. So obviously that's a person that really wasn't hungry. There's got to be something on the menu you could eat at Burger King. It's got to be something, But it's like, I don't like Burger King. That's not where I like to eat. Well, you're out begging in front of Burger King. So again, you're not really helping them, and that's not what he says. You just give. It's not. The point is are you willing to give? 1 John 3:17. But whoever has this world's goods and beholds his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. Notice this next statement. And whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. I had a neighbor like this. Every time I loaned him something, I never got it back. I remember one time I didn't have a broom to clean up the garage, so I went next door to borrow a broom. It was my broom. I loved it. It was a great broom, I bought the thing, and he would always, but every time he asked about it, I knew I would never get it back. I had one of the guys in the church was telling me that he was loaning stuff to his neighbor, and one day his neighbor had a garage sale, and he bought his stuff back from the neighbor at the garage sale. Now, we're laughing at it, but one day it was kind of interesting. Something must have got into him. I don't know if you heard the message or something, but something got into him, and he started returning stuff, and I had doubles of everything. It was crazy. I felt like it was a rental yard or something. I had all of this stuff that I never had before, but he just started returning it. And what we have to ask ourselves, the question is it worth the relationship? You got to demand that thing back. Is it worth the relationship? And the next thing is it worth the testimony of Jesus? That's really what's at stake here. Sometimes it's really a meism. I got to have this. It's mine. I bought it, and I understand all that. But there's another equation. It's going to ruin the relationship. On the other hand, it's going to ruin your witness for Christ. Maybe you just need to say, I'm going to go back to Harbor Freight and buy another broom. That's what I'm going to do. And that's literally the course of action to take. Verse 31, treat others the same way you want them to treat you. Now, this is also recorded in Matthew 7:12. Therefore, however you want people to treat you, so treat them, for this is the law and the prophets. Now, this is called the golden rule. And let me just say that this was given before Jesus, approximately 1,000 years before Jesus. There were similar statements that were given, very similar to what Jesus said, but not quite exactly as to what Jesus was saying. But in every case, they were negative. What you would not want others to do to you, do not do to them. But Jesus changed it and says, what you want others to do to you, do to them. So what Jesus says is a whole reversal on that. This is positive. It's not negative. And again, this only happens through a new birth because we're so self-centered. We're always thinking about ourselves. To be thinking of others before ourselves is not natural. It's supernatural. It's spiritual. So a believer can start to think this way. They start to think about the benefit to others, what it will do for others, how it will be a blessing to others. They start to think this way. It's a supernatural thing that happens. So it brings us now to verses 32 through 38, and this is love explained. So now Jesus wants to make it clear. Now, I want to be very clear about that. This is non-conditional, okay? I want to make this real clear. This is unconditional love. I am talking to you. The world uses conditional love, but that's not how you operate. So verse 32, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Now, all of us can relate to that. There are certain people that maybe the first time we met them, we just kind of clicked. They got the same sort of personality we have, the same kind of likes and dislikes that we have. And you just kind of hook them, especially if it's a person that, you like, you're kind of a jokester and you've got a good sense of humor. You meet someone else like that and go, I like this person. I think we can do a little dueling together, something like that. There's a few people here that are like that. We got one guy in the church. He is such a smart mouth. I love him so much. He just, oh man, every time he opens his mouth, like this, I love that. It's just fun. And so you just kind of love the guy because you just like that part of him. It's just a kind of this personality thing. But then on the other hand, there's people that you met, the time you met him, it's like, man, why? It was a bad day when I met them. It's just like, why? It's just like everything you say, they're the opposite of. Your suggestions are stupid. And it's just like, everything is just like, it's just like going against them. So you say, you know what? I'm going to hang around with the person that loves me and I love them and it works out real well. I hope that God will credit me for loving those that love me. And so what he says here, for even sinners love those that love them. That's what the world does. You just hang around those that love you and you love them. Verse 33, if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. So it's easy to practice acts of kindness to those that we like and those that are extending the same kindness. It's kind of like, you give me a Christmas card, you'll get a Christmas card. That's kind of what the thinking is. It's like, you do this for me, I do it for you. You get me a birthday, I get you a birthday, you get Christmas. This whole thing is all reciprocal. And Jesus is saying, what's this? I mean, that's nothing. That's what the heathen does. Look at verse 34. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. So you got banks and loan institutions that lend money in hopes of getting back their money plus interest. But what Jesus is saying is loan to those who will not return the favor. That's different. You're prepared to loan and to give it up, then that's what you do. If you're not prepared to give it up, then don't loan it. You're not like a loaning institute where you're going to, I know I'll get it back like this. And there are cases where you're not going to get it back. And if that's the case, Jesus says, okay, that brings a reward. Look at verse 35. But love your enemies and do good, and lend expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and evil men. So when he says love your enemies and do good and lend expecting nothing in return, what he's basically saying is do not despair and don't give up. You can loan it to them, be kind to them, do good to them, even if it's not reciprocal. You can do that. Now, why can we do that? Notice the two results of it. Number one, your reward will be great. In Luke 22:29-30, good and faithful servant. We do that, God sees it. God says your reward's going to be great. But notice the next thing. And you will be sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and evil men. You'll become just like your heavenly Father. God is gracious to those that are unkind, that are undeserving, and so are you. So you know what? You're taking on the likeness as a child of God. You're taking on the likeness of the Lord. Notice the comparison here. It's not with other people, it's with God. We can always find someone that we're better than, but that's not the standard. The standard for a disciple of Jesus is Jesus. That's the standard. Look at verse 36. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Now, by merciful, he means to forgive when it is in our power to avenge. And I would like to look at this verse as really the bridge for the next two verses. Not 39, but verses 37 and 38. And basically what he's going to say here is that you reap what you sow. That if you are a judgmental person, get ready, you're going to be judged accordingly. If you're a person that is generous in your giving, guess what? It's going to come back on you. God's going to give to you. So it's a bridge that tells us that whatever things we are doing, that's what we should expect in return. So here in verse 37, do not judge, do not condemn, but the positive is forgive and give. Verse 37, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Pardon, and you will be pardoned. So again, if we are constantly looking for faults in others, exposing those faults in others, in hopes that it makes us look superior and better, get ready, because that's what's going to happen to us. That's how we're going to be judged. We're never to judge people so that we can look better. That's not what it's about. And if we're a censorious type of judgment, that we make a judgment upon not hearing both sides, get ready, because that's what's going to happen to us. You listen to one side. I've learned that. The People's Court. I don't know if you ever watched that before. Mean Shinlin, or whatever her name is, man. She's a mean lady. But anyway, so she's on there, and she doesn't mess around at all. I mean, I like her. But you watch a guy comes on, and the neighbor says, I hired this tree trimming company to trim my tree, and look what they did, and there's a stump, So you go, oh, this guy, you need to throw the book at him. And so I called them, and I explained to him that I want the tree just trimmed up. I want it laced out. And then when I came home, look what I got. And here's this picture of the stump. You're thinking, okay, case is closed. Let's just crucify this guy right now and get this over with. Let's go hang him and we'll have lunch, or something like this. So then the guy comes up and he says, they called me on the phone and they told me to trim the tree. But then when the roommate came out, they said they agreed that they wanted the tree taken out. Oh, the story's changing a bit. Now it sounds that the roommate came out, and he said they discussed it, and they didn't want it trimmed. They wanted the tree taken out. So the guy simply did what he was instructed to do. And the word came from supposedly both of the parties. But you see, you just listen to the one side. You can say, oh, that person's wicked. That person's this. There's that. You know what the other side is. So he says, well, if that's the way you want to judge, get ready. The day will come in which you will be judged accordingly. And this is the law of reaping and sowing. Now he talks about giving in verse 38. Give, and it will be given to you. So if we give to others, what's the result? God will give to us. And that's a principle. If you're a giver and you're a generous person, God's going to come out. Last service, a person was just telling me about this, how God has blessed their lives through the giving. They just give, give, give. And they said, man, look at my life. Just check it out. It's the Lord. This is what he said here. You give, and the Lord gives back. And it says they will pour into your lap. Ruth 3:15 speaks about this. So when a person was buying grain, they would have a jar or a vessel that would be a quart or whatever it might be. And they would open their garment that was just this flowing garment, almost like a sheet. And they would put it in the middle of their garment. And they would then pour the grain into the vessel. And if anything overflowed onto their garment, it was theirs. So what they would do then is they said, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. So they would then take the jar and they would shake the jar to make sure if there's any voids, any air pockets, that it would be filled up. And then they would then put a little bit more to make sure that it's completely full. I remember years ago, we lived next to a thrifty drugstore. Some of you don't even know what I'm talking about right now. I think they're Rite Aids now, I think is what they are, but Rite Aid drug. But what they always advertised was their hand-packed pints and quarts. And my favorite was double chocolate malted crunch. It was like the greatest ice cream on the planet. But I got to know over the years that we lived there was certain individuals knew how to pack it. I mean, they would hand-pack a pint or a quart, and the lid was like 2 inches above the thing. It's like they would pack that thing, and it just would go up like this, and they'd put a lid on just to make it legal or something, just to do that. But then there was others that were just the letter of the law. I mean, they were waiting for that thing to just, kind of be done at the lid, and then the lid would go on, and they would do that. And what he's saying here is that, listen, if you're a generous person, and you'll just overflow it, you'll give generously to you. He says, for by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return. So the flip side is if you're stingy, then that's going to be the repercussions of your stinginess. If you are generous, then generosity is going to come your way. I want to close this morning with just two thoughts. We covered a lot, but just two thoughts this morning. Number one, through God's love, I will love this person because by God's grace, I have chosen to love this person. That's a beautiful picture of it. God's commanding us to do the impossible because God will do it through us. Number two, God's unconventional love is an attitude of the heart that expresses itself positively when others are negative, generously when others are selfish, all to the glory of God. That's what God's love is. Maybe this morning you could say, you know what, I could sure use a portion of God's love. And you know what, I think we all could. We daily need to receive God's grace and his love. God, you love me. I'm undeserving. God, let me be a channel of your love to those that also are undeserving. It's like that old saying, one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. That's where we're at.